How are we going to let these people skate on by on the we're only going to use AI for good? I'm sorry. Do these people think that like the decision to use AI is like you're sitting at your computer and option A is be Lex Luthor and option B is like be Superman? That's like how ethical choices surrounding the use of AI are? Is it like it's very obviously always like a choice for good or like for evil? I fucking hate this shit. Like, go read actual ethical frameworks and like try to make decisions. Like, so infrequently is a decision about the usage of AI between the good and the bad or the evil or anything else. It will always be about two competing values at various points of time.
Welcome to Punchy by Rival, where we take the gloves off to share the hard-hitting realities of the challenger marketing world. Each week, we answer your burning questions, cut through the BS, and tell you what you need to know about the world of marketing to grow your brand, business, and career. All right, we are back with another hot and spicy episode of Punchy. Emphasis on the hot because it's 30 degrees here in London, and basically the world melts down when it gets this hot. And our guest today, a very special one, Connor Altier, Global Head of Brand Strategy at Reebok, who, by the looks of it, you must be sitting in a nice air-conditioned room somewhere, Connor, because you're wearing a jacket that's making me feel even hotter sitting here without even a fan. But anyway, how are you doing in Boston today?
Doing good. It's very humid and hot here. So I'm assuming you got your workout in this morning as you typically do. So got my workout in this morning and it's disgusting. So I'm glad to be sitting in this nice air conditioned room in Reebok HQ.
Yep, no air conditioning in the gym either. So just basically schwitzing until this heat wave ends. Anyway, let's get into it. Jenna looks either very confused or very focused.
You're doing that to yourself, man. You're doing that to yourself. There are gyms here that have air conditioning. There are gyms here that have air conditioning. I don't want to hear these complaints. You're doing that to yourself.
Not CrossFit gyms. I promise I wouldn't talk about how much I do CrossFit because Dubose is just ready to make fun of me for it. But since Connor's here and I've got my backup, I think we could take you too. So maybe we'll talk.
I'm just going to point out that the Crunch Fitness in Greenpoint has air conditioning. If you've chosen to go to a gym that has the aesthetic of Rocky II when he trains to fight the Russian, then obviously it's going to be uncomfortable there.
You know what? There are a bunch of cow carcasses in the back that we hit from time to time just to get an extra rotation in. But anyway, we digress. We got a bunch of questions to go through today, some from our community, our AMP community, and also on LinkedIn. So thank you for submitting your questions. Let's get into it. Question number 1. Are there any tried and true principles for leveraging brand purpose effectively? And effectively, I would underline and say 3 times effectively on a day-to-day basis within campaigns. Connor, I'm going to go to you for this one.
Yeah, I think, this is a topical one for us, right? We work between Reebok and Rival. We were the ones that kind of worked together to really pull through Reebok's brand purpose. And I will say, quick shout out to Rival. What an amazing job we did. But I think for me, it's pretty simple. And I think if you're going to effectively deploy anything, you need to have feedback and you need to have objective criteria to look at what you're deploying and refer back to as kind of a scorecard. So what I think, brand purpose is a really big topic and can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But I think for, when we thought about brand purpose, we really think about what is the reason we all come here and what is the human benefit that we're really trying to bring into the world. And that can be broken down into a variety of different things, whether that is a humanitarian purpose, whether that you're trying to innovate with purpose, you're trying to, there's employer branding, et cetera. I think it's just getting really clear on what that human benefit is and having objective criteria that leads back to it. So if we take Reebok, for example, we believe our brand purpose is that we believe that movement is a form of self-expression and that movement enables you to become your true self. So for us, anything that we do from a campaign space should encompass some form of the individuality that comes through movement, making sure that benefit of movement, make sure that benefit of self-actualization for individuals shines through. And those are just 2 really clear objective criteria that if we're looking at any piece of marketing content that is going to be briefed in, we can always look back at that sheet and say, well, does it check off on this? And does it check off on this? So it's just about getting really sharp on why you're doing what you're doing as a company, which is, obviously a bigger topic in and of itself, but having that objective criteria for if you're looking at anything, any piece of content, any piece that you're about to deploy, looking back on that objective criteria and checking it off.
So, Dubose, I want to make sure we get your thoughts on this one as well, also because you may or may not have released some research on this topic very recently. But I actually want you to start with something that Connor said that I'd love for you to pick up on and expand on, and then, of course, share your broader perspective. But he mentioned kind of measurement framework, objective criteria. How would you recommend brands and marketers actually quantify the progress they're making around brand purpose?
I think it has to be done through contribution in other business metrics. I think when we start to think about the idea of purpose as its own thing that can just be measured, I think we tend to outkick the coverage on it for most organizations. I think it's starting from a place where we understand that consumers are going to say it's incredibly important, but we also know that price, product, other things, as we saw in our research, is going to trump purpose on its own, means that purpose is a value multiplier. And I think if we start to think of purpose as a value multiplier, then you can start to think about it as a contributory factor onto things like consideration, sales, employee recruitment, and the such. But I think that for me is probably where it's going to be most effective, is this idea of it's not okay, are we 5% more associated with saving the rainforest, and let's pour all of our money into building that association, versus have we found a purpose that makes sense for us? Does it tie to our business reality and our product reality? And is it contributing and multiplying the value that we're creating in other areas, either for employees, for prospective customers, or for current customers? And I think when you think about a measurement framework like that, you get to a much more realistic and effective place for purpose. And I think, it's worth saying, is one of the things that really came out of the research is, I don't think we're anti-brand purpose in any way. I think it's a very exciting thing for brands to be able to do. I think it's down to the idea that not every brand has to save the world on day one. And I think it's a very emotional issue. Like the world is on fire. There are lots of things that people are worried about, and we want to contribute as individuals on that. I think marrying that with the business reality so that we can prove the effectiveness of purpose in an organization, resource it properly, and be realistic about what it's able to do are going to be where you're going to see the greatest impact, because that's going to lead to a sustained effort from organizations versus kind of one-offs that we're seeing from a lot of organizations at the moment.
So my kids literally just got home from school. To continue the Murphy's Law of this Monday, we're probably going to have some small humans coming in here in a second, and you'll most likely hear them in the background. Anyway, so Dubose, I want to stick with you because the next story that we're going to talk about, as soon as you posted it on the internal Rival Slack channel, I was like, we absolutely need to, as Jenna likes to say, throw hands on this in Punchy. So VCCP, big holding group networked agency, has launched their AI creative agency, which, feedback for Viren and Shale, because in the show notes they capitalized the F, but very importantly, the F is not capitalized in the name of this agency. I'm being sarcastic in case you couldn't tell. Anyway, Faith, the AI creative agency from VCCP, very light on details of what this is actually going to do. There are some people who already have full-time jobs who are now apparently the CEO and CSO of it, but they do say that it is built around their faith that AI should only ever be used for good, and it has 4 organizing principles. Be transparent when AI is being used, be authentic, fact-checked, AI-generated for content, be compliant and break no laws. I think that's a good one, although I'm not sure you really need to say it, and be ethical, only use AI for good. So I'm going to hold back my thoughts for a second to get yours as Dubose, because they're probably going to be a little bit more informed. But what do we think about this from VCCP?
So I am going to be the voice of enthusiasm over cynicism on this, despite my initial kind of reaction, and say, look, I think this is the first of many agencies that has gotten excited about the potential of generative AI and shall we say, maybe went a bit too far on how they've reacted to it. But I think it does come from a place of excitement around the potential of it. We're actually doing some research this week. It'll come out at the end of the week on generative AI and marketer and consumer attitudes towards it. Like, the stuff we've seen mirrors what we've seen here with this. Marketers are significantly more excited than the overall population about the potential of AI. they're significantly more confident that it's going to be able to create better work and that it's going to be able to able to create work that's indistinguishable from what a human has created. Like, are we there yet? Potentially not. Is it incredibly exciting? Yes. So I can't blame the people at VCCP for maybe going, right, what we need is a new agency versus what we need is a new process in a current agency to leverage some of the tools and the things that are there. But I think there is potential there. They're not going to be the last to do this. I don't understand lowercase names. I was Limp Bizkit a completely lowercase name? Because that was the last one I could think of. Like, because the L and the B were lowercase in Limp Bizkit, and it feels like it went Limp Bizkit and then Faith. Maybe that's where I got it from because of the cover.
I'm sure that's where they got it.
Exactly. It's the worst version of George Michael's Faith ever. But if you've forgotten about it, go back, listen to it. It's on Spotify. But yes, that's my thoughts summed up best about this Limp Bizkit, Faith, AI.
I mean, come on. We've all been in this industry for a long time. I think, sure, the broader intent and what, of course, they're all going to talk about, and every other network agency that is launching their version of this. And by the way, I'm surprised that it actually took so long. Of course, they recognize that this is an important thing for them. But man, stuff like this to me is just like innovation theater, and it's a grab for the headlines. And I think exactly what you said is the most important thing, which is this is putting a label on something because it's easier to change things, or actually not really change things, just make it look like you're changing things than actually changing how VCCP or a traditional creative agency actually does its work or, looks at its business model. But before we go to Jenna, Connor, I want to get quick thoughts from you. Just sitting on the brand side, if you got a pitch like this, and you can be, obviously you get my energy, you get Dubos's energy, but I want to genuinely hear what you think. How would you respond to this? Is this something that you would be excited about? If you like, what's your thoughts on this? Because obviously AI is something you need to be thinking about as global brand strategy lead. Is this the right way that you would want an agency to do it?
So the way I typically think about AI, I think of it way more as an efficiency tool than anything. And mainly because anytime I've tried to choose Chat GPT or anything like that to help with my role, I'm like, I can't use any of this. It's that classic, it's that, South Park hit the nail on the head. If you just use Chat GPT as it is to try to write an episode or do something, unless you have a real human behind the wheel of that, you're not going to get anything fruitful. But I think when it comes to, less on the creative side, more on the media side, there could be something compelling around an AI application for deploying media, for deploying, optimizing your media mix, et cetera. I think I'd be okay with something like that. But when it comes to deploying brand purpose or deploying, driving that emotional connection with a consumer, I don't know if there's an appetite on the brand side for not having that human touch driving the creative. So I think that's just my point of view. And I think I definitely sit in a very emotionally driven industry that is predicated on identity. And I just don't know if artificial intelligence is there for something like that. I also just the whole faith thing, like the whole branding of it as an agency just makes me chuckle. So it's I don't know, to your point, it just feels performative to me at some level, but yeah, definitely interested more on like the media mix optimization side, less so on I'm a little skeptical on the creative side.
I think that's a perfect segue. Oh, go ahead, Dubos.
I think there's a really interesting point there. I just wanted to jump in on, and I think Connor, as you mentioned, like you look at Midjourney, you look at some of the other Runway, some of the other technologies coming out on this. I think they're incredibly transformative, but I think the value is going to be the oversight of creative directors, of people who can sort through and curate the output that's there. And I think that is going to be an amazing gift for advertising and creative agencies. But I think figuring out how to do that requires integrating it into your normal process. I think, name jokes aside, I think one of the things I always find about when storied advertising agencies spin off small, kind of differently named organizations, it kind of feels like it's a vote of no confidence from the beginning. Because at the end of the day, it goes, if this doesn't work, we can just get rid of it. If it does work, cool, we'll kind of absorb it back in at some point. I think, for something like this, a place like VCCP has amazing talent to leverage these things and know what good looks like. just integrate it into the day to day. That would be my biggest question on it. Why does something like this have to have a different label? Why can't it just be what it is? An incremental progress step right now, and then something that could revolutionize the industry later on, but it's going to require some thinking on what we do with it day to day.
Because there are a lot of usually very old people running usually the creative departments of these agencies that don't want to change. That's the very short answer. Having sat within a big traditional agency and been asked to change it, at that point it was about social, it wasn't about AI. It's a lot of the experience that I ran up against. Jenna, was that a hand that you were about to throw, or did you have something else to add?
How are we going to let these people skate on by on the we're only going to use AI for good? I'm sorry. Do these people think that like the decision to use AI is like you're sitting at your computer and option A is be Lex Luthor and option B is like be Superman? That's like how ethical choices surrounding the use of AI, or is it like it's very obviously always like a choice for good or like for evil? I fucking hate this shit. Like, go read actual ethical frameworks and like try to make decisions. Like, so infrequently is a decision about the usage of AI between the good and the bad or the evil or anything else. It will always be about two competing values at various points of time between transparency and explainability in some cases and like the quality of results, right? Like how can we always be transparent if like some advanced AI models like neural networks are inherently unexplainable, like these types of things? The reason that this feels performative, Connor, is because it absolutely is, and because there's absolutely zero serious discourse taking place behind this like stupid like faith like name. Like shut the fuck up. That's how you throw hands on something, by the way. That's the real problem with all of this stuff, and it's completely nonsense. And then that was it. That's my last thing that I had to say.
Yeah, they should have named
Wait, one more thing. There's a really good chalk radio podcast about this. It's from MIT that they talk about how they're trying to teach software developers now how to have competing ethical frameworks about the decisions that they make in their software. That's an actual engagement with the good and the bad. Sorry.
And they should have just named it like not Skynet.
Right? Like, it's just, shut up. Like, what is this, baby time frolics? Like, go home. Like,
I think if you're going to name an agency after an AI thing, just name it Johnny 5, and you got all the short circuit movies to build on. Yeah. I think given Jenna's opinion, we should just name one Heretic and then set up across the street and see if we can.
All right. Continuing with Jenna, but moving on. So there's been a Digiday survey that indicates that agencies expect Apple to be the winner and Meta to be the loser, with third-party cookies largely going away. So the question here is, what factors do you think contribute to this perception, and how might Apple capitalize on the changing landscape? And if you have any advice on how Meta can plug some holes in their sinking ship, I'm sure that would be appreciated as well.
I've really honestly enjoyed the win coming out of the sales of Meta because, again, like you could read the writing on the wall years ago that their incredibly intrusive business model was eventually going to go the way of the dodo. This has been a foregone conclusion for fucking years. And instead of dealing with it, they all had a collective hallucination about the value of the metaverse and have moved away from like their ad solutions, like and all these other kinds of things. Yeah, they are going to be the losers of this because they had an opportunity to make a response to market forces and they didn't take it. I think that they might get through it in a couple years at a significantly reduced valuation because they've also foolishly seemed to have decided to double down on their bad business decisions and are like, I think, like about to like lay off or like test laying off a reasonable number of their like customer service and like support representatives for ad buyers, making their already buggy and fucked up ad product even more difficult to deal with and manage. So yeah, I think they're going to be losers for a little while. But there's a couple bright spots, like, I think that, like I say, some of the recent relaunched, like, AI and creative optimization tools that they have are pretty impressive and pretty good, but I think they're going to be eating it for a little while. And I think that's why everybody has that perception, because they did not alter their underlying business model, and they're now, increasingly overpriced inventory that's less effective, as a result of the death of the cookie. Apple, I don't really know why they're benefiting quite as much. I think that this is more a testament to the power of like Apple's like incredible brand and like their own ad campaigns and how well those work even on other marketers as to like their association with like privacy and a couple other things. But they haven't really yet, I think, capitalized a lot on their own kind of competing ad products or networks. Apple search ads see some pretty good revenue and are growing, as is like Apple News and a couple other placements. But I think they're slow playing this one. I mean, like realistically, the amount of like ad revenue that they could possibly stand to make is, I think, still like, less than the sales of like the iPad in like 1 year. So this really isn't like that huge of a deal for them. But yeah, I think this is a little bit more about like Apple has managed to not fuck up. And that's kind of why they're the winners and Facebook is just flailing around like crazy. I don't know. I also think that the actual winners of this are, I was checking around, like there's like it's just the crazy growth in the number and like the ease of which like other like marketplaces, fintechs, like even like smaller publishers, really the number of places and how easy it is for them to start to spin up their own ad monetization businesses and ad networks. We've started to explore like a lot of those things about, again, like smaller e-com marketplaces and even like say fintechs like Klarna and a couple others that have really like done a good job spinning up their networks. I think that they're going to be the big winners out of the death of the cookie, and I'm glad that we're all kind of like collectively working through the stages of grief and slowly coming to acceptance as an industry. I'm very proud of us.
All right. In the interest of time, I'm going to move us on to our last question, which is the grab bag that everybody's going to be able to chime in on. So, Connor, I'm going to start with you, actually. So this question comes from Danielle Church, marketing director at X4 Communications. I would love to hear people's thoughts on dark social, as it's so difficult to track accurately. How are marketers communicating the benefits to the wider leadership team? And I will be honest, I had to look this up. I've seen the term thrown around a little bit, but I did need to look up what Danielle meant by dark social. I'm going to read one definition here that I thought was pretty good. So dark social describes the invisible shares that happen through channels like messengers, but also email and text message. The term was coined by Alexis Madrigal of The Atlantic in 2012, who said that we're only seeing and measuring the tip of the sharing iceberg. So basically, it's all of the social messaging and sharing that we're not able to track on social media networks directly. So Connor, again, the direct question from Danielle was basically how are marketers communicating the benefits to the wider leadership team? But she also said in general, she'd love to hear people's thoughts on dark social. So is this a term that's going to come up? Is this something that you're looking at Reebok? What are your thoughts on this topic?
This has not come up within leadership internally here, but speaking to it personally, that spooks me out a little bit. Just to think about, like, that makes me immediately want to get to use WhatsApp for everything. So with some encryption, but I think it comes down to there's a level of obviously there's a level of privacy that comes into play here, and I think as it's thinking back to Faith talking about the transparency of things, and I think if it's one of those things where if I'm sure it, like, a lot of companies are already using it, but if it got out of the bag that a company is like really leveraging a lot of this stuff, I'm sure a lot of consumers would kind of raise an eyebrow. Now, obviously, we opt into things left and right, whether it's your iTunes, whether it's like your Spotify or iTunes, you opt into so many different things without even reading them. So I'm sure we're all agreeing to something so that our information can be shared through this stuff. But I think when I put my brand cap on, I think there's a little bit of there can be a breach of trust with the consumer if it were ever to get out to a wider audience that this stuff is being leveraged. And there might even be a sense that it's already happening, right? How many times have we said, "Oh, I feel like I was just talking about this with someone else, and I just saw an ad on my Instagram." So I feel like there's already a level of skepticism out there with consumers. I think that if this got to a wide scale, because I didn't even really know about this. If it got to a wide scale consumer knowledge, I think there would just be an added level of skepticism of consumers for these bigger corporations. So I think, to me, it just feels like a risk. But there's no doubt that it's probably incredibly powerful because you're sharing how you actually feel about things with your immediate network. So.
And when it comes to, because I interpret a lot of this as it's basically word of mouth, right? And some word of mouth, of course, happens in real life. Some word of mouth happens on social platforms where we can track it. But a lot of it happens, like Connor, I know I've sent you podcasts that I just copy the link and send it to you in text, and that's not being tracked. So when it comes to kind of the messaging side of this, because as I understand it, that's a big part of what the, the definition of dark social is, and the opportunity and potentially also the risk for marketers driving kind of that word of mouth shareability specifically on platforms where you can't promote it or track it. That must be part of what you're trying to do with a lot of, I know, like the cultural collaborations and campaigns at Reebok.
I mean, yeah, I mean, there's two sides of the coin, right? The treasure trove of data that you would get from that, and being able to, that buzz, like you want to be, tip of tongue for all consumers. And there's particularly in our industry, which I'm chuckling because I'm thinking about my former boss, Laura Favre, who would always throw a flag when everyone said the term, which is hot in our industry, brand heat. Like, how do you track that? Right? How do you, like, obviously there's sales is a lagging indicator, but how do you track brand heat? It's this like immeasurable thing that lives in the ether. But that's what I really think it is. It really is that word of mouth. Is this brand doing cool shit? Is this brand is this brand, living up to its values? Is this brand, doing something innovative? Right. And that's not always going to get talked about through PR. That's not always going to get talked about through those avenues. But people that are in the industry, and people that are that are sneakerheads are going to be talking about this stuff. They might not be buying it immediately, but that share of mouth, if you will, is 100% real. I mean, again, to me, it just comes back to like if it got out that a company like us or Adidas or a Nike was really tracking this kind of stuff, you can bet your bottom dollar that people are going to be like, wait, what? So of course I would love to track those things. It's just something you've got to measure of, like, is socially as a society, are we ready for something like that?
I don't lose sleep over this. Like, there's so many, like that, like there's so many other, there's always going to be so many edge cases of like how it's like our measurement and attribution are inadequate. We were doing some research for one of our clients, like on a MarTech like overview. And it's like, I've been saying this for years, as I think like many people have. It's impossible to ever have a perfect, flawless view of 360-degree like customer interactions or whatever else. And like, we're talking about such an incredibly small, infinitesimally small percentage of your tracked impressions and like, the sum of like your overall marketing activities. Like, there might be, again, like, some, again, fringe or like edge use cases for some brands where this is different. And like, it's just one of those challenges that realistically there's not going to be a simple or a clean solution for, or if it's like really, really crucial to like the center of your strategy, then, there is probably something to be said for like, owning and controlling those distribution channels, like with like broadcast WhatsApp groups and spinning up like custom, like UTM tracker links. Like, there might be like some workarounds for those, but I would say probably for 95% of brands, this makes up such an infinitesimally like small blip in tracking and attribution. And if it doesn't for your brand, then you probably need, I feel like, some hacky kind of solutions, again, that are specifically designed for those types of use cases. And even then are going to have their own limitations. I don't lose sleep over this one.
I mean, I think there's an interesting thing here that there's always a bias to focus on the things we can measure. And I think at the end of the day, that's just the natural way we tend to approach data, we tend to approach marketing. I think there is something here about the idea of this is a useful reminder that branding, marketing, everything is messy. And actually, you're not going to be able to perfectly measure all of it, nor is it linear. And I think the interesting thing about something like this is the dark social kind of on-ramp and off-ramp of our measurable activity is just something we have to accept. You are creating assets, you're creating brands, you're creating content that is going to dip from measurable channels to create a reaction that goes to unmeasurable channels that will dip back into measurable channels at different points, be those other media channels or be that purchase. And I think at the end of the day, if it wasn't dark social, it could be something else. So I think, to quote the noted philosopher Donald Rumsfeld, I think we just have to get comfortable with the idea there are unknown unknowns. at different points, and if it's not this, it would be something else. So
I thought
I think,
I thought we banned Donald Rumsfeld quotes. That's what you told
we
me last
should.
time I said
We
that.
really should. As I was saying it, I was like, we should really ban Donald Rumsfeld quotes. So that's the first and last one ever on
There's no,
Punchy.
we need to come up with like equivalent alternative to that because it really is.
Clearly, somebody else in history that did not invade a country
I don't think
has
so.
said
I'm
has
pretty
said
sure he
has
was
said
the
a
first
quote
and
like
only
that.
one.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the Punchy wall, like what Donald Rumsfeld is the first one that we're banning quotes from. Henry Kissinger is probably a close second, just in the same
Yeah.
vein, but we'll go from there.
Okay, so it sounds like to sum things up, a big thing is to make sure that you're not doing anything that you wouldn't be comfortable with the public knowing when it comes to tracking data and conversations, not losing sleep over it because you're never going to have a perfect model of being able to track everything. And also, and I guess Dubose, you're kind of in the same vein as Jenna, there is certainly some benefit from it. And I really like that idea of like, because part of Danielle's question was how do you communicate the benefit of it? The on-ramp into the campaign and the off-ramp past the campaign. I think that's a place that it can sit, but it's not something where, because there's no measurability, it's not something where it's like there can be a specific strategy and set of tactics that you can then measure and understand whether or not it's delivered the exact return you expected. It's just part of kind of greasing the wheels and building a campaign effectively in the world of 2023 and 2024. Okay, Danielle, thank you so much for submitting that question. So we are going to move on to our rant and our rave section. Dubose, I'm going to start with you. What have you got to rant and rave about? Does it maybe have to do with postcards?
No, but I will mention that one quickly.
Next time.
So generally, for everyone as it can next week or when this episode goes live, I imagine we may be there. If you happen to run into us, we've been doing quite a lot of research around different things, brand purpose, AI. We're wanting to answer marketers' questions during Cannes. So we'll be putting reports out on LinkedIn. Look out for those over the course of the week. But also, if you want an easier way to consume the research, we will be breaking those reports down to postcard form. So if you manage to flag down one of us, you can get one. You can mail it back to your agency. And that's your I learned something while it can. Actually, really quickly, my rant for the week, it's about something I really, really loved that I came across when we were doing the brand purpose report that just went live. It was the idea that one of the best collaborations I've seen around brand purpose in a while comes from Samsung and Patagonia. Not the normal Patagonia stuff that rightfully gets all the airtime it should, but actually they partnered to make a washing machine that helps deal with microfiber pollution. And I thought it was one of those things that gets little airtime and should get a lot more as something that really shows how brand purpose should be something that can be small but smart. And I think this really is. You've got a brand that knows quite a lot about fibers and really, really cares about pollution. And you've got a brand that makes washing machines and needed an answer and possibly some thought leadership from someone outside of the company. So I think it really shows how two organizations could come together to make something that's smart, meaningful, authentic, and actually moves the needle and shows that brand purpose work doesn't have to be the world's largest thing, and it doesn't have to be one brand on its own crusading out trying to tackle big issues. So really, really love that. Look out for the postcards while we're at Cannes. Yeah, that's mine.
Jenna?
Are we going to Cannes?
Well, we should. I mean, correction in Dubose's statement. We will be there unless one of us gets stuck on an overnight bus from Rome like they did last year. Jenna, over to you.
I bought train tickets. Okay, I don't know. I actually don't know if this is a rant or a rave, but it's more I'm just like watching the drama with interest. The Reddit third-party API pricing drama and the current like Reddit blackout. I don't necessarily know, like I have not been following like the actual, like the personality, like drama particularly closely, but I do think it's very interesting, having looked at the new API, like pricing model, where I do think that it is a very clear business decision by Reddit that the value of their user data is so significantly high that they're no longer willing to cede it to any third-party developers. And frankly, I think that probably would have just been a better PR move to just like outright say that. But like we've been exploring this, like I was saying, with a couple other like tech partners or like tech partnerships about like, that do have API access. And I am interested to see kind of, with the death of the third party cookie that we were talking about earlier, kind of what the land grab for data and data usage and data rights access is. And if this is kind of one of the, along with the Twitter API fucking bullshit. I don't know what the fuck's going on with that, but like kind of the Reddit stuff too about like, again, like companies making serious decisions about the commercial value of their APIs and user data in ways that might have some pretty serious competitive impacts for kind of your third party or other like development applications. So I don't know if that's a rant or a rave, but it's I'm watching it interestingly to see what happens. Yeah.
Connor, take us home. Something you're passionate about this week.
I think one of the things that I'm thinking about is just maybe it's in the context of my role. I think I see it a little bit differently than others. It's just how deep brand actually goes and actually bring its life. I know that sounds pretty intuitive, but when we think about brand purpose, brand personality, all of those, connecting with consumers, it goes beyond just, slapping on a PowerPoint and then, going out and saying, all right, now we got to do this in our campaigns. Everything kind of needs to be working in unison. It needs to go wide and it needs to go deep. It needs to be, not just the people, not just the people you align your brand with. It's not just it's not just the campaigns you run. It's not just the products you make. It goes down to the level of, how are you standing up your culture? How are you making your own employees feel? And I think, it's not an or conversation. It's an and with all of those pieces. And that's, to me, I think that's something that gets, brand purpose, something that just gets conflated with just like, oh, it's sustainability, or, oh, it's like a human rights thing in our industry. And it kind of goes only as far as one of those verticals. And ultimately, like, your purpose is why you come in, day out to your organization, and why you actually exist. And that needs to permeate out into every single vertical beyond just, I bias towards the 4 Ps because, I'm a marketer at heart, but it goes beyond that. It's like every framework you can imagine, it needs to permeate its way through. And I think that it gets lost of how Herculean of an effort that can be at times, and how deliberate you need to be within each of those steps along the way to pull it all the way through. Otherwise, it can either be performative or it's just that's where it starts to kind of not, the rubber just doesn't hit the road. So I think for me, what I'm passionate about is just a level of education, not only for my own organization, but for other organizations as well, of, and luckily, working with you all at Rival, you totally have understood this and helped us along in our journey. But I think that kind of myth busting within our industry kind of needs to happen. So for me, that's what I'm passionate about this week.
Good stuff. All right. That is all the time and more that we have for you this week. Please enjoy. Talk to you later. Punchy is a production of Rival. We are a growth consultancy that builds challenger brands, strategies, and capabilities to disrupt categories. If you want to learn more about us, check out wearerival.com. If you want to connect with Jenna, Dubose, or myself, email us at media@wearerival.com or find us on LinkedIn. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, share with anyone you think might enjoy it, and leave us a review. Thanks so much for listening, and see you next week.